Listen, I've been through some shit in my 63 years on this planet. 3 tours in Vietnam, 20 years with the DEA, and another 15 working trafficking cases for ICE before I retired. I thought I'd seen the worst of humanity, but nothing prepared me for what happened that night outside the Pink Flamingo on Route 9. Nothing prepared me for having my face rearranged by some roided-up bouncer who thought he was protecting his turf from a creepy old man. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and tell you how this whole mess started, because if you're going to understand why I ended up eating pavement outside a strip club at my age, you need to know the whole story. And you need to understand why I can't walk away from kids in trouble, no matter how old I get or how much my body protests. See, there was this case back in '98, still gives me nightmares. We'd been tracking this trafficking ring that was moving kids through Phoenix using fake adoption agencies as a front. Beautiful operation, really. They'd target desperate pregnant women, promise them good homes for their babies, then sell the infants to the highest bidder. Some went to legitimate couples who thought they were getting legal adoptions. Others went to people who had darker purposes. We finally got a break when one of the birth mothers got suspicious and called us. Maria Gonzalez, 19 years old, barely spoke English, but she knew something was wrong when they wouldn't let her meet the adoptive parents. We set up a sting operation, had Maria wear a wire to her next meeting. Everything went sideways when they made her, found the wire, figured out she was working with us. By the time our backup arrived, they'd grabbed Maria and disappeared. We searched for 3 days, followed every lead, called in every favor. Found her body in a warehouse on the outskirts of town. She'd been beaten to death, probably for trying to protect her baby. The baby was gone, 2 months old, disappeared into a network we couldn't crack. I still have the case file at home, still check the missing children database every few months, hoping maybe someday I'll see a picture that looks familiar. That kid would be 27 now, probably has no idea how his mother died trying to protect him. That's the thing about this job. The ones you save keep you going, but the ones you lose, they never really leave you. Maria Gonzalez is why I can't stay retired, why I can't sit on my porch and pretend there aren't kids out there who need someone to give a damn. So when Tony called me about the Pink Flamingo, I didn't hesitate. Not because I'm some kind of hero, but because I've got ghosts to answer to. It was a Tuesday night in October. Cold enough that you could see your breath, but not cold enough for the smart folks to stay inside. I was sitting in my truck across the street from the Pink Flamingo, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, watching the parking lot like I'd been doing for the past 3 weeks. See, retirement doesn't suit everyone, and it sure as hell didn't suit me. When you spend 40 years chasing the worst kinds of predators, sitting on your front porch watching the grass grow starts feeling like a death sentence. That's when my old partner Tony called me up. Tony Ramirez, good man, still working trafficking cases even though he's pushing 60 himself. He'd gotten a tip about some underage girls being moved through our area using local establishments as fronts. The Pink Flamingo had come up in chatter, and Tony knew the local PD was either overwhelmed or compromised. He needed someone who could blend in, someone expendable if things went sideways. "Eddie," he'd said to me over the phone, "I know you're supposed to be enjoying your golden years, but these pieces of shit are moving kids through your backyard. You interested in one more mission?" Golden years my ass. I'd been going stir-crazy for 6 months, driving my wife Margaret nuts with my restlessness. She'd actually encouraged me to help Tony out, said it might give me some purpose again. "Just promise me you'll be careful," she'd said, and I'd promised, though we both knew I was lying. So there I was, watching the Pink Flamingo, cataloging license plates, noting patterns, trying to spot anything that didn't fit. The place was exactly what you'd expect. A low-slung brick building with neon signs and blacked-out windows, surrounded by a gravel parking lot that had seen better decades. The clientele was mostly truckers, construction workers getting off late shifts, and the occasional businessman trying to feel dangerous for a few hours. For 3 weeks, I'd seen nothing but the usual suspects. Then Tuesday night happened. I was about to call it quits for the evening when I spotted her. A girl who couldn't have been more than barely legal, maybe early college age at most, walking across the parking lot with two men who had handler energy written all over them. She moved wrong, you know? Not like a girl heading to work, but like someone who'd been worn down and rebuilt to comply. I've seen that walk before, in too many raids to count. The men were pros, mid-40s, physically fit, wearing clothes expensive enough to blend in, but not flashy enough to draw attention. They flanked the girl without making it obvious, but I could see the control in their positioning. One stayed slightly behind her, the other slightly ahead. Classic surveillance pattern. My blood started boiling. After everything I'd seen, after all the kids I'd helped get their lives back, here was another one being fed into the machine. And she was young, Christ, she was so young. I grabbed my phone to call Tony, but they were already moving toward the club's back entrance. If I waited for backup, she'd disappear into that building, and God knows where she'd end up next. These operations move fast. By tomorrow, she could be 3 states away. I made a decision that probably wasn't smart, but it was the only one I could live with. I got out of my truck and started walking across the street. Now I know what you're thinking. What's some 63-year-old retiree gonna do against 2 professional handlers? But here's the thing about guys like me. We don't really retire. The skills stick around, the instincts stay sharp, and the anger at seeing kids get hurt never goes away. I wasn't planning to take them down single-handed. I was planning to get close enough to confirm what I was seeing and create enough of a disturbance to spook them. I crossed the parking lot, trying to look like just another sad old guy looking for some company. The handlers had the girl at the back door now, and one of them was talking to someone inside. This was my chance. I approached from an angle, pulling out my phone like I was checking messages. As I got closer, I could hear them talking. "She's clean," one of the handlers was saying. "No tracks, no diseases, premium merchandise." Premium merchandise. Jesus Christ, they were talking about a kid like she was a fucking car. The girl looked up at me as I approached, and I saw the fear in her eyes. Not fear of me specifically, but fear of everything. She had that hollow look I'd seen too many times before, like she'd given up hope so long ago she couldn't even remember what it felt like. I needed to get closer, needed to hear more, needed something concrete I could pass to Tony. But as I took another step, the girl's handler noticed me. "Hey, old man," he called out. "Private party. Keep walking." I raised my hands, tried to look confused and harmless. "Sorry, just looking for the front entrance. These old eyes aren't what they used to be." But the second handler was already moving, putting himself between me and the girl. These guys were good, alert, professional. They knew how to spot surveillance, and apparently they were better at it than I was at hiding it. I said, "Keep walking, Pops." The first handler had his hand inside his jacket now. The girl was looking between us, and I could see her calculating whether to run. But where was she going to run to? In her mind, these men probably represented safety compared to whatever consequences she'd face for trying to escape. That's when the back door opened, and out came the biggest human being I'd ever seen outside of a wrestling ring. This bouncer had to be 6'6", 300 pounds easy, with arms like tree trunks and a neck that was wider than my waist. He looked at the situation, looked at me, and came to exactly the wrong conclusion. "This old pervert bothering you guys?" he asked the handlers. "Yeah. Been following us around the parking lot," one of them lied smoothly, "trying to get close to the girl." And just like that, I went from being an old federal agent trying to save a kid to being a creepy old man stalking a teenage girl. The bouncer's expression changed from professional annoyance to genuine anger. "That right, Grandpa? You like them young?" I tried to defuse the situation. "Look, there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not—" But he was already moving, 300 pounds of muscle and righteous indignation coming my way like a freight train. I could have identified myself, could have tried to explain, but that would have blown whatever chance I had of helping the girl. These handlers would disappear her the second they knew law enforcement was sniffing around. So, I took the beating. The bouncer's first punch caught me in the stomach, doubling me over and driving all the air from my lungs. The second one, an uppercut, snapped my head back and sent stars exploding across my vision. I went down hard, my knees hitting the gravel with a crack that I felt all the way up my spine. "Fucking pervert!" the bouncer snarled, drawing his foot back for a kick. I tried to roll away, but I'm 63 years old, and this guy was young and fast and full of adrenaline. His boot caught me in the ribs, and I heard something crack. The pain was immediate and intense, like someone had shoved a hot knife between my bones. "Tony, you piece of shit," he yelled, aiming another kick at my kidneys. "Stay away from our girls." Our girls. Even through the pain, that phrase registered. This wasn't just some bouncer protecting his workplace. This guy was part of it, part of the operation. The handlers weren't customers or outside contractors. They were working with the club. The beating continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only a minute or two. Kicks to my ribs, my back, my legs. I curled up in a ball, trying to protect my head and vital organs, tasting blood where I'd bitten my tongue. The gravel was digging into my face, and I could feel warm wetness running down my cheek. The worst part wasn't the physical pain, though. The worst part was hearing the girl's voice through it all. "Please don't hurt him," she kept saying, her voice small and scared. "Please, he didn't do anything." Even after what these monsters had done to her, she still had enough humanity left to feel bad about an old man getting hurt. That's when I knew for sure what I was dealing with. This wasn't some runaway who'd chosen a bad path. This was a victim, a kid who'd been broken and trafficked and was still trying to protect a stranger. Finally, the bouncer stopped. I was lying on my side, each breath sending lightning bolts of pain through my ribcage, when I heard one of the handlers speak up. "All right, show's over. Let's get her inside before someone calls the cops." Through my swollen eyes, I watched them guide the girl toward the door. She looked back at me once, and I saw something in her expression that cut deeper than any physical blow. Resignation. Like this was just another terrible thing happening in a world full of terrible things, and she'd learned not to expect anything different. The bouncer was standing over me, breathing hard from the exertion. "If I see you around here again, old man, I'll put you in the fucking hospital. We clear?" I managed to nod, though it sent fresh waves of pain through my neck and shoulders. "Good. Now get your ass out of here before I decide to finish what I started." I lay there for a few more minutes after they went inside, partly because moving hurt like hell, and partly because I needed to think. I'd blown my surveillance, probably spooked the handlers, and failed to help the girl. Worse, I'd confirmed that the pink flamingo wasn't just a front for trafficking. It was an active part of the operation. The bouncer, the handlers, probably the management, they were all in on it. Eventually, I managed to get to my feet. Everything hurt. My ribs were definitely cracked, maybe broken. My face felt like hamburger, and I was pretty sure I'd need stitches where my cheek had been scraped raw by the gravel. But I was alive, and more importantly, I now had concrete evidence of what was happening. I limped back to my truck, every step a reminder of my limitations. Time was, I could have taken that bouncer, or at least given him a better fight. But that was 30 years and 3 wars ago. Now I was just a beaten-up old man who'd learned that good intentions and experience don't always trump youth and size. I called Tony from the truck, my voice thick with blood and pain. "Eddie, how'd it go tonight?" "They've got a girl," I managed to say. 16, maybe 17. 2 handlers, professional operation. The bouncer's dirty too, probably the whole place. "Jesus, Eddie, you sound like shit. What happened?" I gave him the short version while pressing a handful of McDonald's napkins to my bleeding cheek. Tony listened without interrupting, which told me he was taking notes. "You need to get to a hospital," he said when I finished. "I need to get that girl out of there." We need to get that girl out of there. And we need to do it right, with backup and warrants and enough evidence to make charges stick. You've given us a starting point, but if we go in half-cocked, they'll scatter and we'll lose her forever. He was right, and I knew it. But knowing it didn't make driving away any easier. I spent the next 3 days looking like I'd been hit by a truck, which wasn't far from the truth. Margaret took one look at me when I got home and immediately started preparing for war. "Edward James Morrison," she said, using my full name like she had when we were dating 50 years ago. "You look like you've been run over by a freight train." I tried to downplay it, told her I'd taken a fall while following up on a lead for Tony. But Margaret didn't raise 4 kids and survive 40 years married to a federal agent by being easily fooled. "Bullshit," she said flatly. "You got into a fight, and from the looks of it you lost. What aren't you telling me?" So I told her. All of it. The surveillance, the girl, the handlers, the beating. Margaret listened without saying a word, but I could see her jaw getting tighter with each detail. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she walked over to our bedroom closet and came back with my old service weapon, a .45 that I hadn't touched in months. "You're going back, aren't you?" she asked. "Tony says." "I don't give a damn what Tony says. You're going back because you can't live with yourself if you don't. I've known you for 50 years, Eddie Morrison, and you've never walked away from a kid who needed help." She was right, of course. Despite the pain, despite the rational arguments for waiting, I knew I'd be back at the Pink Flamingo as soon as I could move without wincing. "Just promise me you won't go alone this time," Margaret said, checking the magazine on the .45. "And promise me you'll take this." I promised, though we both knew the second part was a lie. I was too old to start shooting people, and besides, the goal was to save the girl, not start a war. Tony called the next afternoon with an update. He'd run the license plates I'd given him and come up with some interesting connections. The handler's car was registered to a shell company in Miami with ties to a trafficking network the FBI had been tracking for years. The Pink Flamingo's owner had a string of arrests for pandering and tax evasion, though nothing that had stuck. Most importantly, they'd identified the girl. Her name was Jessica Chen, 16 years old, reported missing from San Francisco 3 months ago. Her parents had been calling police departments up and down the coast, posting her picture on social media, hiring private investigators. They'd even offered a reward, which had generated hundreds of false leads but nothing useful. "Her father's flying out here," Tony told me. "David Chen, works in tech, seems like a good guy. He's been beating himself up for months, thinking Jessica ran away because of something he did." That hit me in the gut. I thought about my own kids, how I'd feel if one of them disappeared into this kind of hell, how I'd blame myself, wonder what I could have done differently, drive myself crazy with what-ifs. "What's the plan?" I asked Tony. "We go in tomorrow night with a joint task force. FBI, local PD, state police, full raid, arrest everyone, tear the place apart." "What about the girl?" "We get her out, get her to a hospital, reunite her with her family." It sounded good, but I'd been through enough raids to know how quickly things could go sideways. If the traffickers got any warning, Jessica could disappear again, this time permanently. These people didn't leave loose ends. "I want to be there," I told Tony. "Eddie, you're retired, and you look like you went 10 rounds with Mike Tyson. I'm the only one who's seen her, who knows the layout, who can identify the handlers. You need me there." There was a long pause. "All right, but you're strictly observation. You hang back, point out targets, keep your mouth shut. This is a federal operation now, not some freelance rescue mission." I agreed, knowing full well that if things went bad, I wasn't going to hang back and watch. The raid was scheduled for Thursday night, during peak business hours when the place would be full of witnesses and the traffickers would be less likely to start shooting. Tony briefed me on the plan Wednesday afternoon, and it was solid. Federal agents would hit the front and back simultaneously while local units secured the perimeter. They had warrants for everything: the building, the computers, the financial records. But when Thursday rolled around, I got a call that changed everything. "Eddie, we've got a problem," Tony said. His voice had that flat quality that meant someone had fucked up badly. "Someone tipped them off. The place is empty, cleaned out. Jessica's gone." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach all over again. "How?" "We don't know yet. Could have been a leak in the local PD. Could have been federal. Could have been they just got spooked after your little encounter. But they're gone, Eddie. All of them. Any idea where? Working on it. These networks have safe houses, backup locations. Could be anywhere from here to Mexico by now. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at my cold coffee and thinking about Jessica Chen. Somewhere out there, a 16-year-old girl was being sold like cattle because I'd fucked up my surveillance. Her parents were probably sitting by their phone, waiting for news that would never come. Margaret found me there an hour later, still staring at nothing. "They're gone," I told her. She didn't say anything, just put her hand on my shoulder. After 40 years of marriage, she knew when words wouldn't help. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number, local area code. "Hello? You the old man who got his ass kicked Tuesday night?" The voice was young, female, scared. My heart started pounding. "Who is this?" "My name's Ashley. I work at the Pink Flamingo." Worked, I guess. They shut us down, fired everybody, told us to keep our mouths shut or we'd end up like the new girl. "What new girl?" "The Asian chick, the young one. They were going to move her Thursday night, but something spooked them. Now they're talking about making an example of her, showing the rest of us what happens when operations get compromised." I grabbed a pen, started taking notes. "Where are they taking her?" "I don't know exactly, but I heard them mention the old Riverside Motel on Highway 206. Place has been closed for years, but some of the girls said they've used it before for special clients." Special clients? I didn't want to think about what that meant. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. There was a long pause. "Because you tried to help her. And because I've got a little sister Jessica's age, and if something happened to her, I'd want someone to give a shit." She hung up before I could ask any more questions. I sat there holding the phone, my mind racing. This could be a trap. Could be the traffickers trying to lure me out for some payback. But it could also be a legitimate lead, maybe the only chance Jessica had. I called Tony, but it went straight to voicemail. Tried his office, got told he was in a meeting with federal prosecutors and couldn't be disturbed. Left urgent messages everywhere I could think of, but I knew how these things worked. By the time the task force mobilized again, got new warrants, set up a new operation, it would be too late. Margaret was watching me from the doorway. "You're going, aren't you?" "I don't have a choice." "Yes, you do. You can wait for Tony. Do this the right way." The right way got Jessica moved to a secondary location where they're planning to kill her. The right way might take 12 hours we don't have. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then she went to the closet and came back with my .45. "Then you better take this." The Riverside Motel was exactly what you'd expect from a place that had been abandoned for a decade. Broken windows, collapsed roof sections, parking lot full of weeds and broken glass. It sat about a mile off Highway 206, down a gravel road that probably didn't see traffic more than once a month. But there were fresh tire tracks in the mud, and I could see light coming from one of the end units. I parked my truck about a quarter mile away and approached on foot, the .45 tucked into my waistband. Every step sent little jolts of pain through my still healing ribs, but adrenaline was keeping me moving. The motel was laid out in a U-shape around an empty swimming pool filled with stagnant water and trash. The light was coming from Unit 12, and I could see shadows moving behind the curtains. There was a black SUV parked outside, same model I'd seen the handlers driving. I worked my way around to the back of the building, looking for another way in. These old motels usually had connecting doors between some units, or at least windows that might not be secured. I needed to see what I was dealing with before I made any moves. The window of Unit 13 was boarded up, but one of the boards had come loose. I pried it back just enough to squeeze through, wincing as my ribs protested. The room was empty except for an old mattress and some drug paraphernalia, but I could hear voices through the wall. "Told you this was a mistake," someone was saying. Male voice, angry. "Should have cut our losses and moved on." "Relax," another voice replied. This one I recognized, one of the handlers from Tuesday night. "We clean up here, disappear for a few months, start over somewhere else." And the girl? Liability. She's seen too much, knows too much. Client in Mexico was asking about young Asians anyway. After we're done here, we drive her south, make the delivery. Problem solved. My blood went cold. They weren't just planning to kill Jessica. They were planning to sell her to someone who'd probably do worse things to her than I could imagine. I moved closer to the connecting wall, trying to get a better sense of how many people were in there. At least 3 voices, maybe 4. All male, except for one that was so quiet I could barely hear it. "Please," the quiet voice said, "I just want to go home." Jessica. She was alive, at least for now. I should have called for backup, should have found a phone, called Tony, waited for the cavalry. But I could hear the fear in that girl's voice, and I knew that by the time help arrived, she'd be gone. These guys were professionals. They wouldn't sit around waiting for law enforcement to find them. I made my way back outside and around to the front of Unit 12. Through a gap in the curtains, I could see part of the room. 3 men, 1 sitting on the bed, 2 standing. Jessica was on the floor in the corner, hands zip-tied behind her back, duct tape over her mouth. She looked terrified, but alive. One of the standing men was the handler I'd seen Tuesday night. The other was someone new, older, maybe the boss. The man on the bed was cleaning a pistol, checking the magazine. 3 armed men, 1 retired federal agent with a bum rib and a 40-year-old service weapon. The smart play was to back off, call for help, hope they didn't move Jessica before the cavalry arrived. But sometimes the smart play isn't the right play. I backed away from the window and positioned myself next to the door, took a deep breath, said a quick prayer, and kicked it in. The door flew open with a crash that echoed through the abandoned motel. The 3 men spun toward me, going for their weapons, but I was already moving. "Federal agent!" I shouted, even though I was technically retired. "Nobody move!" The man on the bed was fastest, bringing his pistol up toward me. I put 2 rounds center mass, and he went down hard, his gun clattering across the floor. The handler I recognized was reaching inside his jacket when I swung toward him. "Don't do it," I warned, but he kept moving. I shot him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing into the wall. The 3rd man, the older one, was smarter. He raised his hands and stepped away from Jessica. "Easy, old man," he said. "Let's talk about this." "Nothing to talk about," I replied, keeping the gun trained on him. "You're trafficking minors. That's life in federal prison. You're making a mistake. You don't know who you're dealing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with. I've been chasing pieces of shit like you for 40 years. The wounded handler was trying to get to his feet, blood soaking through his shirt. I kept one eye on him while watching the older man. "On the ground," I told them both, "face down, hands behind your heads." The older man complied, but the handler was still moving, still dangerous. I moved toward Jessica, keeping the gun pointed at the men. The girl's eyes were wide with terror, but when she saw me, something changed in her expression. Recognition, maybe hope. I reached down with my free hand and gently pulled the tape off her mouth. "It's okay," I told her. "My name's Eddie Morrison. I'm here to take you home." "Are you a cop?" she whispered. "Close enough. Your parents are looking for you, Jessica. They've been looking for months." Tears started running down her face. I thought they'd given up." "Parents never give up on their kids." I was working on the zip ties when I heard the wounded handler moving behind me. I spun around just in time to see him raising a backup piece, a small revolver he'd pulled from an ankle holster. Time slowed down the way it does in life or death situations. I could see his finger tightening on the trigger, see the barrel swinging toward Jessica and me. I knew I couldn't get my gun around fast enough to stop him, so I did the only thing I could do. I threw myself between the gun and the girl. The bullet caught me in the left shoulder, spinning me around and sending fresh waves of agony through my body. But I stayed on my feet, and I kept my gun pointed at the handler. "Bad choice," I told him, and put another round in his chest. By the time the sirens arrived, I was sitting on the floor next to Jessica, both of us bleeding but alive. The girl was free of her restraints, and I'd used my belt to make a makeshift tourniquet for my shoulder. The 3 traffickers were either dead or unconscious, their weapons secured. Tony was the first one through the door, followed by what looked like half the FBI field office. He took one look at the scene and started barking orders: secure the suspects, call for ambulances, establish a perimeter. "God damn it, Eddie," he said, kneeling down next to me. "I told you to wait for backup." "Couldn't wait," I managed to say. "They were going to move her." Tony looked at Jessica, who was huddled against the wall, still shaking, but no longer tied up. "You okay, sweetheart?" She nodded, then looked at me. "He saved me. They were going to sell me." "Well, that's not happening now," Tony assured her. "You're going home." The paramedics arrived a few minutes later, and everything became a blur of medical questions and law enforcement interviews. They loaded me into an ambulance, but I insisted on staying conscious long enough to see Jessica reunited with her father. David Chin arrived at the hospital about 2 hours after we did. I was lying in a bed getting my shoulder stitched up when I heard voices in the hallway. A man speaking rapidly in what sounded like Mandarin, then English, then back to Mandarin. A nurse was trying to calm him down, but you could hear the desperation in his voice. Tony brought him by my room a few minutes later. Chen was a small man, probably in his 40s, wearing a wrinkled business suit like he'd jumped on the first plane he could find. His hair was disheveled, his eyes were red-rimmed, and his hands were shaking. "Mr. Morrison?" he said, standing in the doorway like he wasn't sure he was allowed to enter. "I'm David Chen, Jessica's father." "Come on in," I told him. "How is she?" He took 2 steps into the room and just collapsed. Not physically, his legs held him up, but everything else just crumbled. 3 months of fear and guilt and desperate hope all came pouring out at once. "I saw her," he managed to say through the tears. "I saw my little girl. She's so thin, Mr. Morrison, so scared. She flinched when I tried to hug her, like she thought I was going to hurt her." His voice broke completely. "My own daughter was afraid of me." "Give her time," I said. "She's been through hell, but she's tough. The fact that she survived what those animals did to her proves that." Chen sat heavily in the chair next to my bed, his hands covering his face. "The doctors say she's malnourished and traumatized, but physically she's going to be okay. They said if you hadn't found her when you did." He looked up at me with eyes that had seen too much pain. "They were going to sell her, weren't they? To someone in Mexico." I nodded. There was no point in lying to him. "My wife and I, we blamed ourselves. We thought maybe we'd been too strict, too demanding. Jessica had been rebellious lately, staying out late, arguing with us about college plans. The night she disappeared, we'd had a fight about her grades. I told her she was throwing her life away, that she needed to get serious about her future." Fresh tears started flowing. "Those were the last words I said to my daughter before she vanished. You're throwing your life away." "She doesn't blame you for that," I told him. "Kids and parents fight. It's normal. What happened to her wasn't your fault. But when she first went missing, the police asked if she might have run away. We had to tell them about the fight, about how angry she'd been. For weeks I thought maybe she had run away. Maybe she hated us so much that she'd rather live on the streets than come home." He wiped his nose with his sleeve. I kept thinking, what kind of father raises a daughter who would rather disappear than ask for help? I thought about my own kids, about the fights we'd had over the years, the times I'd come home from work too tired and angry to be the father they needed, the kind of father who works 60 hours a week to give his kids a better life than he had, the kind who worries so much about their future that sometimes he forgets to enjoy their present. "You're not a bad father, Mr. Chen. You're a scared one, just like the rest of us." He was quiet for a moment, then looked at me with an expression I'd seen before, a parent trying to process the unthinkable things that had been done to their child. "The FBI agent, Mr. Ramirez, he told me what you did, how you got beaten up trying to help her, how you came back alone when you thought she was in danger, how you threw yourself in front of a gun to protect her." His voice was getting stronger now, more controlled. "Jessica told me you called her by name, told her that her parents were looking for her. She said she'd given up hope that we still cared. Parents never give up on their kids, I said, even when the kids think they do. Chen stood up abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the parking lot. You want to know what she said when she saw me? The first thing she said? I waited. She said, "I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm sorry I threw my life away." His shoulders started shaking again. She remembered our last fight, 3 months of hell, and she was apologizing to me. What did you tell her? He turned back to me, and for the first time since he'd walked in, I saw something other than pain in his expression. I saw love, fierce and protective and absolute. I told her that her life wasn't thrown away. I told her that every second she survived, every breath she took, every moment she held on to hope was her fighting to come back to us. I told her she was the bravest person I'd ever known. He sat back down, leaning forward in his chair. And then I told her about you, about how a stranger had risked everything to bring her home. I just did what any parent would want someone to do for their kid. No, he said firmly. Not everyone would have risked their life for a stranger's child. Most people would have called the police and hoped for the best. You got yourself beaten up for her. You walked into a room full of armed men for her. You took a bullet for her. He paused, gathering himself. Mr. Morrison, Jessica doesn't remember a lot about the last 3 months. The doctors say that's normal, that trauma can cause memory gaps. But she remembers you. She remembers your voice telling her that her parents were looking for her. She remembers you putting yourself between her and that gun. I didn't know what to say to that. In the moment, it hadn't felt like a choice. It had just been instinct, the same instinct that had kept me alive through 3 wars and 40 years of chasing bad guys. She wants to see you, Chen continued, if you're up for it. She's scared of most people right now, especially men, but she asked for you specifically. She said you made her feel safe. Of course, I said. I'd like to see her too. Chen started crying again, but this time it was different. This time it was relief, gratitude, the tears of a man who'd gotten his daughter back from hell. I don't know how to thank you, he said. How do you thank someone who gave you back everything that matters in the world? You take care of her, I said. You love her, you get her the help she needs, and you never let her forget that she's stronger than what happened to her. That's how you thank me. He nodded, wiping his eyes. There's something else. Jessica asked me to give you this. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. I opened it and found a drawing. Stick figures of a man and a girl, with "Thank you for bringing me home," written in shaky handwriting. I stared at that drawing for a long moment, thinking about Maria Gonzalez and her baby, about all the kids I hadn't been able to save over the years. But this time was different. This time, a scared girl was going home to parents who loved her. Tell her I said she's going to be okay, I said finally, and tell her that any time she needs reminding how brave she is, she should look in the mirror. Because anyone who can survive what she survived and still worry about an old man getting hurt, that's real courage. Chen was smiling now, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. I'll tell her. And, Mr. Morrison, my wife and I would like you to come to dinner sometime when Jessica's feeling better. She wants to cook for you, as a thank you. I'd like that, I said. I'd like that very much. Over the next few days, the full scope of the trafficking operation came to light. The Pink Flamingo had been one of several fronts operated by a network that moved girls from California to the East Coast. They'd been in business for at least 5 years, generating millions in profits while destroying dozens of young lives. The bouncer who'd beaten me up, Marcus Turner, turned out to be more than just muscle. He was the operations local coordinator, responsible for security and transportation. When the FBI searched his apartment, they found records showing he'd been taking a cut of every transaction. Turner was arrested at his girlfriend's house, still nursing injuries from where he'd tried to resist arrest. Apparently, he'd mouthed off to the wrong federal agent and learned that karma has a sense of humor. The club's owner, Vincent Torelli, was picked up at the airport trying to board a flight to Brazil. He'd been operating illegal businesses for 20 years, using the strip club as a front for everything from drug distribution to human trafficking. The financial records they seized showed he'd been laundering money through half a dozen shell companies, but the biggest catch was the older man from the motel who turned out to be Frank Delacroix, a major player in the trafficking world. The FBI had been hunting him for years, and he'd always managed to stay one step ahead. Having him in custody opened up investigations in 12 states and 3 countries. All told, the task force arrested 37 people and rescued 11 girls, some as young as 14. Jessica was the oldest, which probably meant she'd been targeted for their premium clients. The media picked up the story, of course. Local news ran it first, then the nationals got hold of it. Suddenly, I was getting calls from reporters wanting to interview the hero retiree who'd single-handedly taken down a trafficking ring. I didn't talk to any of them. This wasn't about me being a hero. It was about a 16-year-old girl who deserved to go home to her family. Margaret thought I was being modest to a fault. "You saved that girl's life, Eddie. There's nothing wrong with people knowing about it." "There's plenty of people doing this job who don't get their names in the paper," I told her. "I'm not special." But the story kept growing. Someone leaked details about my background, my service in Vietnam, my years with the DEA and ICE. Suddenly, I wasn't just a concerned citizen who'd stumbled into a trafficking operation. I was a decorated veteran who'd spent his career fighting the good fight. The phone calls got more persistent. Interview requests, speaking opportunities, offers from publishers who wanted me to write a book. I turned them all down. What I didn't turn down was the call from Tony's boss at the FBI. "Morrison," he said when I answered the phone. "This is Assistant Director Walsh. I think we need to talk." Walsh came to my house the next afternoon, along with Tony and a woman I didn't recognize. She turned out to be Sarah Mitchell, head of the FBI's trafficking task force. "Mr. Morrison," Walsh said, settling into my living room like he owned the place. "What you did was impressive. Reckless, but impressive." "I did what needed to be done. That's exactly why we're here. We'd like to offer you a consulting position with the task force. Part-time, advisory role, helping us identify and infiltrate trafficking operations." I looked at Tony, who was grinning like he'd just won the lottery. "This was your idea, wasn't it?" "Guilty as charged. Eddie, these people need someone with your experience, your instincts. You proved that at the Riverside Motel." Mitchell leaned forward. "We're not talking about field work, Mr. Morrison. Mostly analysis, pattern recognition, maybe some surveillance, the kind of work that could save a lot of kids without putting you in harm's way." I was about to turn them down when Margaret spoke up from the kitchen doorway. "He'll do it," she said. I stared at her. "Margaret, Eddie Morrison, you've been going stir-crazy for 6 months, driving me nuts with your restlessness. This Jessica thing was the first time I've seen you really alive since you retired. If they want to pay you to do what you'd probably do for free anyway, we'd be fools to turn it down." Walsh smiled. "Smart woman. What do you say, Morrison?" I thought about Jessica Chen, about the relief in her father's eyes when he saw her again. I thought about the 11 other girls they'd rescued, about the ones they hadn't found yet. "When do I start?" 3 months later, I was sitting in another parking lot, watching another strip club, drinking another cup of cold coffee. But this time, I wasn't alone. Tony was in the passenger seat, and we had a full surveillance team backing us up. This time, we were doing it right. The trafficking network we'd broken up at the Pink Flamingo had been just one tentacle of a much larger operation. Our arrests had created ripples throughout the criminal underground, forcing other networks to change their patterns, their locations, their methods. Some of them had gotten sloppy in the transition. "Movement at the back door," Tony said, lowering his binoculars. I looked through my own pair and saw 2 men escorting a young girl toward a waiting car. The girl looked scared, compliant, broken, just like Jessica had looked. "That's her," I said. "Maria Santos, 16, missing from Phoenix 3 weeks ago." Tony spoke into his radio. All units, we have confirmation. Target acquired. Move in. This time, there was no beating, no gunfight, no last-second heroics. Federal agents swarmed the building from 3 directions while local police secured the perimeter. The traffickers were in custody within 5 minutes. The girl was safe within 10. Professional, efficient, by the book. The way it should be done. After the arrests, I found myself standing next to the ambulance where the paramedics were checking out Maria Santos. She was physically unhurt, but emotionally shattered, flinching every time someone moved too quickly or spoke too loudly. "Señorita Santos?" I said gently. "My name is Eddie Morrison. I work with the FBI. We're going to take you home." She looked up at me with dark eyes that had seen too much. "Mi familia?" "Your family. Yes. They're waiting for you." For the first time since we'd found her, Maria Santos smiled. Later that night, I was sitting on my front porch with Margaret, watching the sunset and thinking about the day. 3 more traffickers off the street. 1 more girl going home to her family. It wasn't going to solve the whole problem. There would always be more predators, more victims, more operations to shut down. But it was something. "Good day at the office?" Margaret asked. "Yeah," I said. "Good day." She reached over and took my hand. "I'm proud of you, you know." "For what?" "For not giving up. For still fighting the good fight, even when you don't have to anymore." I squeezed her hand and thought about Jessica Chen, about Maria Santos, about all the other kids out there who needed someone to give a damn about them. Retirement could wait. There was still work to do. The phone rang inside the house. Tony's ringtone. "New case?" Margaret asked. "Probably." "Going to answer it?" I stood up, my shoulder protesting slightly from the old gunshot wound. "Yeah," I said, "I'm going to answer it." Because somewhere out there, another scared kid was waiting for someone to bring them home. And as long as I was able, I was going to be that someone. That's what we do. That's what we've always done. We don't quit, we don't give up, and we sure as hell don't let the bad guys win. Not on my watch.